Welcome to the Shyamcast. I am Brett.
And my name is Shyam. Welcome
So
everyone.
much. Thanks so much for being here. So we left off last time, Shyam, we're in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, and
Mm,
we're talking about Krishna's first lesson to Arjuna. And
mm,
today we're really going to try to focus more in on those beginning teachings, the science of the soul
mm,
that Krishna is teaching to Arjuna.
mm.
So yeah, let's just get right into it then, right?
Yeah.
So
So, mm,
Or yeah, just to, I guess to lead us off, Prabhuji. So we talked a lot about last time about how Arjuna was lamenting for something that was not worthy
mm,
of his grief.
mm,
Um, and we talked in some detail about that and what is worthy of
mm,
lamenting. And
mm,
I suppose to sum that up, what's really worth lamenting is none of the transitory things that happen to
mm,
us in our life,
mm,
not for the living or for the dead. So if you're
mm,
identifying people in the dichotomy of birth, death, you're thinking of people as the body. You really are your body. Then
mm,
that none of that is worth, lamenting
mm,
for.
mm,
But essentially, if we're not concerned with figuring out who we really are, and we're sort
mm,
of lost in this haze of good and bad and pleasure and
mm,
pain and birth and death, that's a lamentable condition.
mm, mm. Like usually people lament, um, deal is lost, business is not going well, job is lost, relationship is broken, um, uh, etc. Anything that connects us not with the soul and the Lord, but on a horizontal plane. So Krishna says it's not worth lamenting
Mm.
because that's not the purpose. That's not the main essence of the purpose of life. But
So what
rather
is
that, mm,
what is our purpose of life?
rather a devotee sees um, purpose is to realize the divine and re-establish that relationship which is lost. And everything here is going to be lost today or tomorrow. If we think this place will be perfect, no, it's never a perfect place. It may be perfect instantaneously and then something goes wrong. And then something goes wrong. And everything that we may be trying to get hold of will be lost because when our time is over in this world,
You
rather,
don't get to keep anything, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And we mentioned it a little bit last time, but one of the things that Christian talks about a lot is the eternality of the soul, the
Mm,
indestructibility of the soul. And,
mm,
this is really meant to relieve all of those
mm,
doubts, all of that
mm,
suffering that Arjun is going through.
mm,
We mentioned that he's referred to as Madhusudana, and he's the one who's going to,
mm,
he's going to slay all of um,
mm,
those negative, emotions, all those doubts.
mm,
And, he starts out by really emphasizing that. I know, we spoke a little bit earlier about this one verse. It's verse 12. Never was there a time that I
mm,
did not exist, nor you, nor any of these kings, nor in
mm,
the future shall any of us cease to be.
mm, mm,
And, he's really pointing to Arjuna right there. If you can just see the way things really are, if you can
mm,
identify people on this higher platform where you're not just thinking of them as this is the body, I am this body, that's my
mm,
family members, those specific bodies, are like
mm,
they kind of belong to me as my family. If you can see past that,
mm,
everybody's just kind of moving from one body to the next.
mm,
That's just sort of the way that the soul works. That's the way that, you
mm,
know, our truer, our it's a deeper seated part of our nature. That's
mm,
what we really are. So
mm,
if you can see people like that, you'll be able to step back a little bit, have more perspective on what this this whole battle of Kurukshetra really is, and you won't be so upset and you won't suffer as much, like you are right now.
Hmm. Hmm. So two more points that comes from this verse that you just read. Uh, Never was there a time when we did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings. That shows that souls are not created at any point of time. No new souls. Fixed. Number of souls are fixed. Because if they're getting created, then at some point of time they did not exist.
Mm.
We are eternal, and who are there? They are there. No more admissions in the college of souls. Admission closed.
We're all enrolled already.
Then never in future will there be a time when we cease to exist.
So we're never going to graduate. Is that it?
We are eternal. That's it. Nothing can harm us.
Mm.
There are multiple philosophies. Some philosopher says the soul merges into God and become one with God. So then we lose our identity, individuality, and then only God exists and we don't exist. But Krishna says, nor you, nor I, nor these kings shall cease to exist. So Arjuna and kings are not going to lose their identity also. Then some philosopher says that the souls are there reincarnating, and when and they become desireless, then they become nothing or they cease to exist. That's it. As long as we have desire continue, once desire is over, die in peace forever. I mean, we cannot say live in peace forever because they say soul cease to exist. But again, that refutes Krishna's explanation here that says, neither you nor these kings nor I shall cease to exist in future.
Mm.
And later on, Krishna also says, one who has taken birth is sure to die, and one who has died is sure to take birth again.
So yeah, pointing to the the cycle of birth and death
Yeah.
called samsara,
Mm.
right? How this is really the natural course of the soul.
Mm.
Uh, and it just what just sort of strikes me about verse 12 too, Prabhuji, I think especially for people who, if they don't have maybe a very strong spiritual life, or they wouldn't consider themselves religious, there isn't a belief in God, um or any
Mm.
kind of faith like that.
Mm.
There's always this fear, and I mean, even for people who do espouse a religion too, there is this fear, but there's the fear that when I die, I'm just going to blip out of existence, and that's just it. Like that fear of death is very strong. I mean, it is the most innate um
Mm.
fear in us anyway, right?
Mm.
And it's just very significant to me that right away Krishna is saying you're never going to cease to exist. If you're
Mm.
afraid of ceasing to exist, or your loved
Mm.
ones ceasing to exist, you should know right off the bat you're never going to cease to exist.
Mm.
Always have been, and you always will be, because the soul is unborn and
Mm.
eternal.
Mm.
And yeah, I guess I'm just sort of maybe seeing that now. It's like it's a real slashing of that doubt right away.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
don't worry, but death isn't what you seem to think it is.
Mm. There was one of my senior. He said when he came to these spiritual programs, before that he was very much frustrated with this world, like a lot of pain, lot of suffering. Many people left away, the job problems, relationship problems. There were so many problems. He's like, I just wanna die and it's end of the game. And then when he read Bhagavad Gita and he says, oh no, it's never the end of the game. The game just begins. There is stage one over, stage two, it's unlimited. Then he thought, oh, I really have to work on solving the problem, like work on how to deal with this world. Escape is not a solution because we can never escape. He was like, finish over. Then when he read this verse, he's like, "Oh, I have to come back again. The cycle continues. So what do I do now?"
Mm. Yeah, it puts responsibility more squarely on our shoulders for our own lives,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, there's if we have that tendency to want to escape from things or sort of maybe avoid the more difficult aspects of life,
Mm,
you know,
mm,
taking on a spiritual practice is really about confronting those things, you know.
mm, mm,
We just had a very, you know, a great visitor, Kalakanta Prabhu,
mm,
in Grand Rapids for this past week, and he was just speaking about this, how a spiritual life is a very active life.
mm,
It is not the kind of life where you retreat from the world
mm,
and just give a bunch of things up and are not really involved with anybody. It's actually quite the opposite, where
mm,
you're really working inside of the world with people. You're really being a part of things. And at the same time, you're trying to practice that detachment from it to where you're not
mm,
being affected so much by the results of what happens.
mm,
But
mm,
I suppose to me, what the message was really is that you have to do that. Like you have to
mm,
still be a part of the world. If
mm,
all you do is retreat and go to
mm,
the forest and sit in meditation
mm,
24 hours a day, you're not going to be confronted with those challenges you have to overcome, and you're not going to
mm,
learn those lessons.
mm,
And so you can only go so far if you choose to do that. And
mm,
that's also one of the big uh, messages that Krishna has for Arjuna as well. Because at
mm,
some point Arjuna does say, I should maybe just go to the forest. Maybe that would be
mm,
the better thing for me to do. Just
mm.
go to the forest and sort of retire like a sage does.
Escape the problems.
Hmm.
Escape.
Yeah.
Let them. We have to fight. The fight means here fight with our own inner nature.
Mm.
So what else Krishna discusses about the science of the soul? Many, many points. Some points.
Mm. Yeah, we mentioned last time a good the one of the analogies that he uses is talking about clothes or change of clothes. That's how
Mm,
the same way that we change clothes from day to day, the soul, the Atma changes bodies from lifetime
mm,
to lifetime.
mm, mm,
Um, there's another analogy that he uses where he speaks about, as our body progresses through its life
mm,
from childhood into adult or teenagehood into adulthood into old age,
mm,
that's also kind of representative of the soul's, progression. It's
mm,
like everything in the material world is always changing,
mm,
including the body.
mm,
I've been reflecting recently with friends about how, like, I turned 30 last year, and I had always heard from people actually that 30 was a significant age just in terms of uh, you realize that your body isn't going to last forever. In different
mm,
ways, things start to maybe you just feel little pains or little discomforts here and there, and everything just stops working perfectly smoothly the way that it
mm,
did when you were a teenager or in your 20s. And I've kind of been experiencing that a little bit, lately. And so, reflecting on it more, and also how people will often say, especially people who are older, they'll say, I feel the same way that I always did.
mm,
That I'm 70, 80, 90, but I still feel like I'm exactly the same person. I like, as they
mm,
can see, like, obviously that this body has aged. There have been many
mm,
changes, and there
mm,
continue to be many changes with the body. But who I really feel like I am, who I know myself to be, has not aged. Is just there's a
mm,
consistency there.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We are not changing, on the body is changing.
Yeah.
Now there is one analogy that says about the science of soul, some practical understanding. Like if somebody asks me, "Am I the hand?" No. Okay. Am I the eyes? No. Am I the head? No. Am I the face? It is my face. I'm not the face. It is my brain. I'm using the brain. I'm not the brain. And I'm using these legs. I'm not this leg. I'm using this heart. And my heart has this. So always we say my. We don't say I. My hand, my eyes, my this. So this is practical understanding that I am something which is not this physical body. This physical body, every part of the physical body, whether the heart or the head, is something that I'm using. And that I, Krishna, here gives the identity as I am that spiritual self. Then also when somebody passes away, we say he passed away. Somebody say dies. We usually don't say dead. We say he moved on, he passed away. Basically indicating that something left. In scientific term also there is out of body experiences, near death experiences of people actually having that shows that the soul is different from the body. So have you heard any stories on that or had any real time experience?
I have never had any
Hmm.
experience like that. Yeah, the closest thing to a near-death experience I had was more of just like a scary thing when I was a kid. Um, but nothing like out of body. But I've certainly heard stories from people.
Hmm. Like one story I heard, I think you may have heard before. It was a retreat of Sachinandan Swami. You met him. Yes.
Hmm.
And are you going to Sadhu Sangha?
No.
Okay, so I don't know if he's coming here again, but very enlivened soul. So when he was very young and he was a monk, then he had this experience that he has some hernia pain, and the doctors were operating, and it was an intense pain, so intense they gave him a lot of anesthesia, so his body stopped uh, responding, but he was still having the consciousness. So, but he could not communicate to doctors that he's still conscious, give him some more anesthesia. And they thought like he's unconscious and we can do the operation. None of the external symptoms were working, but he could experience the pain. And that time they started taking a knife and cutting off his body. And that gave him so much pain that he can't even cry externally. But that intense pain was so intense, 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 intense. Um, and suddenly he felt the relief. And then he realized that he's not in the body anymore. And then he saw himself observing how the doctors were performing the operation. And then he felt like, oh, thank God, this is wonderful. And he felt relieved because no more pain. And then it took him few moments to realize. And then he felt, oh, this is what the this word calls as death. And then he was thinking. So it is said that when the soul goes, the subtle body goes with it. The mind, intellect, and the false ego goes with it. So he has the whole thought process with him, but he's observing this physical thing out of himself. And then he became a little bit concerned, like, oh, what's next? And then he remembered his friend who was sitting outside, and he was thinking, oh, I told my friend to pray for me. Is he still praying for me? And then he saw the door is locked. It was operation theater. But then he like, oh, I can see. Oh, I can see. So no material elements could obstruct him. And then he went right across the walls. And then he saw that his friend, he was praying for his well-being. And then when he came back, so it's a long story, but in essence, then he says after some time, he just doesn't know what happened next. All he remembered is after 3 years, he woke up again. So there was again unconscious state for 3 days, and then he again woke up. So that gave him this deep realization, this outer body experience, deep realization that, oh, this physical body is temporary and it's gonna go any point of time. And I must work towards what's the reality. And that time he was praying, oh Krishna, please help me. because he was a in our faith we call God by the name Krishna. So he was saying, "Oh Krishna, please help me." And then everything disappeared. And then he actually took sannyas, which is a renounced order, the fourth stage of life, and very sincerely practicing spirituality. And we see him; he has attained perfection. So
Wow.
sometimes experiences are needed.
Yeah, I think it seems to be a through line with people who have had out of body experiences,
Uh,
near death experiences, that afterward they really have a new perspective on life, and they're sort of
mm,
forced to come closer to the idea of their own death. It's typically for
mm,
us, most of us, just one of those things that's always kind of there, but you never really have to think about it. And we're really encouraged in the larger society not to think about it and don't talk about it. And it's
mm,
certainly considered taboo. And so it seems to me that, people when they're faced with that kind of thing, it really wakes them up to something. And
mm,
and
mm,
and
mm,
just like, uh Maharaj who you're talking about, or Prabhuji,
mm,
um it's
mm,
it really forces you into that, um thinking more clearly about, what am I really doing? What is all of
mm,
this? What is
mm,
life? I am creating that desire to want to
mm,
go down that path, to figure
mm,
it out.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm,
One thing that you mentioned was the subtle body, and I was wondering if you could
mm,
maybe talk about that and the distinction that's drawn between the material body and the subtle body, as far as
mm.
all of the
Yes,
constituent parts that we're made of that Krishna talks about.
yes. So this gross body is made up of five elements. It is made up of earth element, which is like the bones, the blood, um, um, there is earth element. Then there is uh, water element. For example, the blood is a mix of water element and the earth element. That's how it has this all these minerals and this color. That's like mix of water and earth element. Then there is a fire element that helps keeps the temperature of the body, helps digest food. That is the fire within the body. Then there is a air element, the breathing, the lungs. Then there is ether element, which is the empty space. So this is what this body is made up of. And this is gross body. This is temporary, material elements. Then there is subtle body. The reason it's called gross and subtle because we can perceive to some extent the gross things, but subtle things we cannot perceive. For example, this is earth element. It's gross. I can see it. I can touch it. But say mobile phone signals, it's subtle. I cannot see it. I cannot perceive it. There are millions of signals passing by here and there, and doesn't matter to me. So many sound vibration are gross, and so many sound vibration are subtle to me because I cannot hear them. We so many things I can see in a frequency range, but so many things I cannot see. They are more subtle. So likewise, there is gross and subtle. And gross elements also are very gross, lesser gross. For example, air is subtler than water because I cannot taste the air. I cannot see the air. And water is subtler than earth because earth I can smell. All this nice fragrance is earth element, but water I cannot smell. Unless I put earth element in the water, make it a fragrant water, then I can smell. Otherwise, I cannot. Um, so they are going from gross to subtle. Subtler than earth is water because I cannot smell. Subtler than water is fire because I cannot taste fire. Subtler than fire is air because I cannot see air, but I can see fire. Subtler than air is ether because I cannot feel sense of touch. Cannot feel I can feel the air, but I cannot feel the space, the ether. So ether is like very subtle, and subtler than that is mind. I cannot touch the mind. I cannot smell it. I cannot taste it. So some people say, I mean, the soul, I don't believe in soul because I don't see it, I don't smell it, I don't taste it. But we cannot do that in the space also. So soul is way more subtler. Even mind, we all know we have mind, correct? We all know. Why? Because we perceive it. We perceive it. You know how nonsense it is, or sometimes it is good also. But then it is not gross. Now, mind is not the brain. Mind is not here. This is a part of the gross element. The brain has the earth element, the blood is flowing in it. So brain is completely a gross element. But mind is subtle element. All the thoughts does not come from the brain. They come from the mind. It is said that the mind is in the region of the heart. So some people say, my mind is not working. So yeah, if they're saying this, that shows that the mind is not working. So it's the brain element. Brain is more like the central processing unit for the body. Just like we are discussing on this laptop, it has a CPU. And if CPU fails, the whole thing fails. Likewise, all the signals goes from that CPU and it is programmed and this laptop is working. Likewise, everything has to process through brain. All the signals, everything is generated here, but still a part of the gross body. Then mind is more like it is said that the mind works on the basis of l- like and dislike. I want to drink this. I want to eat this. I don't like this. I want to repeat the past pleasurable experiences. I want to avoid situations which I am not comfortable with. This is all mind. I want to do what I want to do, and I want to avoid what I don't want to do. So this is mind, and it says the mind is a big blocker. Blocks us. Then subtler than mind is intelligence, and intelligence. Intelligence. One of the symptom of intelligence is discrimination. Intelligence says actually what is right, what is wrong. Mind says what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And many times they're not aligned. Example is exams are coming and somebody says, let's go for a movie. Intelligence says, you will fail tomorrow. You have to study now, devise now. If you go for a movie, it will be 3 hours. You'll come back midnight. You will sleep. Exam is there. Don't go. But the mind says, that's okay. I'll study whole night. So mind is drawn to instant pleasure. Intelligence has discrimination. Intelligence sees what is right, what is wrong. And there is always a disharmony between mind and intelligence. But ideally, mind should listen to intelligence. But usually, mind is like we always go for instant pleasure. And so the discrimination goes down and there's a reaction for it.
Mm,
And subtler than intelligence is false ego. So, false ego is so subtle that we cannot perceive it. It is so subtle that we think like I don't have false ego, or it feels like only sometime I act on false ego. Because
it's
we perceive false ego only this much, so we think like this much I can understand, but it is 100% constantly on us.
mm.
But it
How
is
would you
so
how,
subtle. Yeah,
how would you describe what the false ego is? Like, is it our identification
yeah,
as a body or as a separate being?
yeah. That's the basis. Ego means identification, and false ego means false identification. And identifying myself as the body is false ego. Now, I want to drink coca is also coming from false ego. Wow. Why? Because I'm this body and I like to enjoy, and this is what pleasure is coming from. It's because of the identification with the body. It is so subtle that we cannot perceive it. Any pleasure in this world, any comfort, everything is the root is that. We can perceive the mind, we can perceive the intelligence. Oh, I like, I dislike. But it's difficult to see that how everything is connected to that. The father is there and they are all the children. Rest all are the children. And he is false ego. But he's so subtle that as we progress in our spiritual life, as we grow more the more and more we can see the subtle. And And the more and more we see the subtle, the more we perceive false ego in our lives. And then we see, oh, this is insurmountable. The more we go deeper, the more we realize, oh, Krishna, this is too much. How much I am bound by this is intense.
And well, I haven't personally recognized my false ego, I would say, but I think just to, to that end anyway, um, with this book, the Bhagavad Gita, is referred to as transcendental,
Mm,
and the word transcendental is used several times in it. At one point, Krishna tells Arjuna to transcend the three modes of material nature.
mm,
And so that's really just pointing to what the goal is, right?
mm,
We
mm,
have these different levels of designation that are part of our how we identify ourselves.
mm,
We might identify ourselves with the physical body. I'm
mm,
this thing, I'm that thing, I'm this part. I like that example you use. It's like
mm,
you can get a lot of pieces of your body removed,
mm,
and
mm,
still be you. You can
mm,
lose limbs, you can get organs replaced,
mm,
or just lose organs, and you still feel exactly the same, just as
mm,
if the 90-year-old feels the same that
mm,
they did when they were
mm,
10 years old.
mm,
um and then you can go a little subtler and get to the mind. I know one example you gave me once was, it's like the mind is just crazy. The
mm,
mind, like, it's referred to as the monkey mind a lot.
mm,
And you were like, the mind is the thing that tells you when there's a fan.
mm,
You're sitting in front of a fan on a hot day. The mind just says, okay, stick your finger in that. Or
mm,
just, what happens if I do this? What if I just push it over? What if I, do something
mm,
inadvisable?
mm,
And, the intelligence is what's sort of like, is meant to oversee the mind, go, hold on, no, don't do that. You know,
mm,
um, if I really think about, what my experience in everyday life is like, it's kind of just my mind always forming some sort of a judgment, or sort of trying to like grab at a certain thing or push a certain thing away. Oh, I like that, I want that. Oh, it's such a nice day. Oh, I'm, or oh, it's not a good day. That makes me feel, you know,
mm,
sad or angry. Oh, I'm mad that it's not a sunny day today. And the intelligence is, that thing that sort of gives you a little bit more perspective, and
mm,
it's sort of like, hey, let's think about our whole, let's think about the bigger picture here. you
mm,
know um the example of, you know the intelligence is what reminds us you shouldn't go to the movie, you have to study. You
mm,
can go to a movie another time. you
mm,
know
mm,
um and yeah, I guess in so many of our lives we're just sort of jumping around from one thing to the next that our mind is
mm, mm,
kind of telling us to do.
mm,
um
mm,
and yeah, when you put in that perspective, I mean, like, the false ego is something that, it's, like you say, I mean, it's so subtle that
mm,
all we really know is that we have one because we do identify with this. It's like I don't know how else to identify other
mm,
than to say I'm this thing, and I walk
mm,
around and I do stuff. Like, I don't know how else to say that that's what me is.
mm, mm,
And yeah, I mean, Bhagavad Gita really, it breaks those fundamentals down. And
mm,
it's, the
mm,
more I think about it, the more it almost is like a shock that, this initial message is that's not what you are.
mm, mm,
You know, you're
mm.
you're something else. You're something that is actually eternal. So,
Think
and it
about in
goes.
this way. I mean, I'm thinking if we can increase our feeling about false ego. Now, um, what a common man is trying to do, he's trying to become happy. How he's trying to find happiness? Through food, through position, through etc. Right? Going somewhere, going to downtown, or going to see a park, or tasting something, or looking for a particular kind of job or a particular relationship. How everyone is trying to do is find happiness. Correct, right?
Hmm.
And this happiness, if you see, they're all connected to the body. what I want to see, what I want to touch, what I want to taste, or maybe a movie or maybe a restaurant. And they're all, the underlying principle of everything is I am this body. You see, everything we do is originating from false ego because I am by default the enjoyer. It is said that we are pleasure seekers. There's a book called Vedanta Sutra that says Anandamayo Bhyasat, which means we are pleasure seekers. Now, when we say we are pleasure seeker, if we identify ourselves as a soul, then we'll seek pleasure only at spiritual levels. But that's not really what we do. You know? We find pleasure in sleeping, we find pleasure in everything. So when we are trying to seek pleasure at the level of body, the underlying consciousness is the body. Everything the mind desires, all the desires. Actually, the false ego is the underlying principle of everything. Generally, we see like what is false ego? If somebody says a bad word to me and I feel hurt about him, then oh, this is my false ego. We identify false ego one or two places. But every desire is coming. It is said that the mind and intelligence are servant of false ego.
Hmm.
So you see how he's the base on whom everybody is sitting. The mind, intelligence, the eyes, the nose, and all the senses, all the sense object, everything is sitting on this table of false ego.
So
So he is the underlying base of everything.
what is the purpose of the false ego then? Why do we have this very strong identification with with the false ego if that's not really us?
Uh, False ego is not an element. It's not a substance. It's a feeling.
Hmm.
That's all. It's a feeling that I am this body. When I identify myself as a body, then I'm pleasure seeker. Now, how can I become happy? Oh, I need this Tesla. Then everybody will appreciate me and I feel good about it.
Hmm. So
But
you
if
said that the nature of the soul is to seek pleasure. And
yes,
that feels like a good thing just to mention because there's nothing, I guess it's pointing towards the fact that there is nothing wrong with seeking pleasure actually, like at
yes,
fundamentally, because
exactly.
yeah, we're not just here to, I don't know, like we're not just kind of like floating along or we're not meant to just like evaporate or whatever. Um, our nature is to seek pleasure. Like we want happiness, we want goodness, and it's just sort of like the way we go about it is not destined to succeed usually because we're going for things that will make us happy short term, but will ultimately not fulfill us, will not satisfy us.
Yes.
Yeah. And that the
I
reason we
mean,
do this is because we are falsely identified. We're just not quite, we haven't quite
yes.
figured out who we really are.
Mm. And if you identify the pleasure, it is said in this word, the pleasure and pains are concomitant. From where the pleasure comes, pain comes.
Mm.
And many places, the pleasure is not really there. Like there is one person who got a Tesla and he's so happy, and everybody is telling, I got a Tesla, I got a Tesla. Then he told him, Prabhuji, come and sit. I said, okay. I sat. He turned on the car. He drove 2 miles. How do you feel? I said, good. I sit in any car. It takes me 2 miles and I get there. And now uh, it may have some break works like this and this. And the pleasure, later say the pleasure is in showing to others what I have. And it is very expensive thing and it works on battery and it doesn't require, it has a high tech technology. And so it's there is no real pleasure actually.
Mm.
Real pleasure is when we experience our relationship with the divine. When we, like in our tradition, we have kirtan, chanting the holy names, dancing. That's when the pleasure comes from within. No matter what we acquire externally, it's not going to give that inner joy. And when we are experiencing pleasure at the level of soul, it's really a true identification. And that's what we are meant to. We want, like we see Kalakanta Prabhu, he says, ecstatic. Spiritual life is ecstatic. When he says that, you feel it. We may not be able to say that, but he says that and he means it. What he says, because he's really enjoying and identifying himself on a spiritual level and enjoying at that level. But external world is shallow. Externally, we may have the whole, it's like it is said, fish out of water. You can give fish a nice everything that we can think of, but the fish breathe from water. So likewise, we breathe from our devotional life. And when that breathing is not there, you can give all the externals of the word, and there is no satisfaction. And that's and on there is frustration, there is pain, and there is all the symptoms and like a roller coaster ride that goes through. But when we are centered and like internally, spiritually, then it's like the whole roller coaster wave. Like today, Kalakanta was mentioning the whole word roller. You can be equanimous because you are so much centered internally. So anything that we are working in this world, the base is actually the false ego.
Hmm.
Identifying with the body and we are trying to find what we at one point of time, because we are spiritual beings, it is said at some point of time we were with the divine, so we were experiencing a very intense joy all the time, and then we came here and then we are trying to find that intense pleasure in this world. So we have this intense desire to be happy, but it's our past experience that we have forgotten. We are trying to find this um through this world, and then we are not satisfied because it just can't, it is external. It will block at the mind, intelligence, and false ego. It cannot go beyond the level of soul. This any nothing can touch the soul, but because it doesn't penetrate deeper, this pleasure, it, no matter what we have, it always feels shallow and leads to frustration today or tomorrow.
Hmm. Yeah, he mentioned earlier as well, the Rolling Stones song "Can't Get No Satisfaction," as a very good example of just what life tends to feel like. Like no matter how I just try and try and try, and I just can't find, real satisfaction,
Uh,
right?
uh,
I'm well, I guess I have two things here. Do you mind if
mm.
I read a verse?
Yeah, please go ahead, Prabhu.
So 2.14
Mm,
says, "O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter
mm,
and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed." So our senses perceive different dualities. We perceive hot and cold, pain and
mm,
pleasure,
mm,
fame and infamy.
mm,
Um, and, you know, in the normal course of events, we feel affected by those
mm,
things. Those
mm,
things influence how we feel and how we think, and therefore how
mm,
we act in the
mm,
future.
mm,
And then that starts to condition us to act in those same ways again, to feel
mm,
those things, those same emotions more strongly, more deeply. Things get more
mm,
ingrained to us
mm,
or in us. And
mm,
I guess you could say we get deeper into that sense of false ego in
mm,
that way.
mm, mm,
And, I guess one thing this verse is pointing out is that we are normally on that level of only identifying with the body and with the
mm,
senses, and just,
mm,
we're just sort of like, reacting to the things that we feel and what happens.
mm,
And so, one of the first instructions, then this is still right at the beginning of really right at the beginning of chapter 2. He's talking about how all those things, they just sort of come and go.
mm,
And if you really
mm,
notice it, all those pleasures and pains, all those opposites, that we
mm,
encounter in life, they just sort of come and go. It's just like the winter and the summer seasons. You
mm,
can't control them. It
mm,
just is like right now, it just is spring. It's
mm,
nice, you know.
mm,
We just had our 6 months of cold in Michigan
mm,
that just got over somewhat
mm,
recently still, and now it's nice, you know.
mm,
Um, and I suppose it's not to say that like we can't appreciate this warm weather that we're having, right? It's
mm,
not an instruction to forget about it. Don't You can't enjoy the sunshine, you know. Um, it's not that. It's not
mm,
like a cold or unfeeling thing, right? It's simply that no matter what's going on externally, no matter what's going on outside,
mm, mm,
you just need to recognize that those things are impermanent.
mm,
It's going to keep going. The roller coaster is going to keep going from good
mm,
to bad and back
mm,
again over
mm,
and over.
mm,
And the work is really to try to remain the same, to tolerate both the good and the bad,
mm,
not to get caught up in lamentation for something that we don't like, and
mm,
also not to get caught up in, the jubilation of things that we do like.
mm, mm,
Because if we really like something or something really makes us happy, if we're too attached to that, when it inevitably goes away because it is
mm,
impermanent, it's
mm,
going to have that effect on us, right? We're
mm,
not going to keep that equanimity.
mm.
Um, yeah.
And how
So,
is that possible? Like I remember one example. It's a doctor's research. They say that when the baby is born, the baby is put over the heart of the mother, and the baby feel like just day one baby, and the baby feels so much love because the mother loves the child so much that the baby feel nourished. And over when the baby feel gets lot of love from the mother, then it is naturally seen the children are better able to tolerate the ups and downs in colleges, in schools, and in friends, because they are centered, deeply rooted with the love that they have received from their parents and especially mother. But the research shows that those whose mothers are not there, they are taken away and sent to orphanage and nobody loves them, then every small thing frustrates them. They become very cranky over like not stable people. Generally, it is same. So this love is actually the divine's love. We can see from our when we are centered with the love within our heart, that connectivity with the divine, then whatever happens, because there is so much depth within us, it's difficult to um, shake us. When we are internally filled with that heavy weight of that love, then any storm or wind may come. Why? Because there is a deep centeredness. Like, there are some flags you can keep in the air, and on the bottom, there is a base. That base you have to fill with the sand. It becomes very heavy. And then you can put a flag, and the air will come here and there, and the flag can sustain the withering of the wind. But if there is no sand inside the base, then one wave come and fall down, fall down. So that's like when we are not centered, when our heart is not filled, and that's how we can tolerate. It's not something, it is not possible otherwise.
mm, yeah, and so that's why we have to nourish the root of life,
Yes,
right? That's
yes,
why, we need that base.
yes.
Um, I know that analogy is used a lot. Srila Prabhupada, one of the most common, metaphors he uses is talking about watering a tree, and
Mm,
how when you water a tree, you have to water the root.
mm,
And when you water the root of the tree, it, all the other parts of the tree are automatically nourished, from
mm,
the trunk to the branches to the
mm,
leaves, you have to water the root. And if you could painstakingly walk around and try to water every single leaf, and
mm.
nothing would happen,
Nothing will
right?
happen.
And it's relatable to our lives. I guess a lot of times maybe we try to, if we put on a show of externals, or if we
Mm,
think that those things are going to make us happy, it's kind of like we're just focusing on the leaves.
mm,
Like we're just trying to water the leaves, or we're so focused on that flag,
mm,
that's
mm,
flying on the flagpole. Like we just want that flag to look so nice. and we're
mm,
not focused, we don't put any sand at the bottom. We don't make
mm,
sure that we have a sturdy base. And
mm,
so uh the first trouble that comes along, it kind of, sweeps us off our feet and we fall down.
mm. And
So
this base, like, um, is our morning time. Like in our tradition, we chant. Some people do meditation on uh, something divine. So when there is a solid foundation in the morning, and then if we get nourished from our chanting meditation, and then the heart is filled. And then the rest of the day, you bring some turmoils. That's okay. We can handle it. So much anxiety will be there, but it doesn't feel like that because we are centered there in our morning time. And it is generally seen people who don't have a daily spiritual practice. It's very difficult to experience what Krishna says, to live what Krishna says. It really needs. That's why Krishna later on, he right now says this is what must be done. Later on, he says how this can be achieved. Just think about me, become my devotee. Then he says how that is possible.
mm, yeah, and really that divine love is really the central point, right? That's really what it's what
Yes.
it's about, and how
Yeah.
you can go all beyond all of these dualities.
Mm,
And just, I guess, when you feel loved, you really don't need
mm,
anything else,
mm,
right?
mm,
It
mm,
feels like you do have that steady base, like you're saying.
mm,
Things
mm,
can't really affect you because you have that thing.
mm,
And so, yeah, that's something that Krishna does come back to, again and
mm.
again in throughout
And
Bhagavad Gita.
it is also said that like we are eternal. We discuss the soul is eternal. Krishna says in this section, the divine is eternal. The love between the soul and divine is eternal. And when that is established, it's fulfillment. But when that is not there, then everything else is not the nature of the soul. And then we are like without the base, sand in the base, and we are like tottering, tottering, tottering. So really that connection centers us, like fixes us. And then something comes and there is something that is holding us and we can't move.
Mm. Well, as much as I would like to establish right now how we form that connection again or find that connection, um, that will be a continuing topic of discussion, certainly as we move
Yes.
along. And we'll get more wisdom, more guidance from Krishna, more good
Yes.
questions from Arjuna as well as we progress.
Yes.
So,
And one thing on the science of soul, Krishna also mentions how the soul, first thing Krishna says, where is the soul located? And he says it's in the region of the heart. Then Krishna says, what is the size of the soul? He says it's 1/10,000th tip of a hair. Then Krishna says it is inconceivable, it is immeasurable, it is invisible because we can see what is gross. We can measure what is gross. We can conceive what is gross. So he says it has none of these qualities. And then Krishna says it is indestructible. Like things in this world get destroyed by fire, by water, by tornado, by tsunamis, by forest fire, or fire breakouts. So Krishna says cannot nothing can touch the soul. Soul is eternal. In other words, Arjuna is fighting with Bhishma, his grandfather, his teachers, and he loves them so much. And the fight is with either a fire weapon or a water weapon or a wind weapon or various weapons. And Krishna is telling, no matter what you do, Arjuna cannot kill them. They are eternal and you are eternal and all these kings are eternal. This is about establishing righteousness in this world. But no matter what happens in this fight, nothing can touch anybody here. And then Arjuna thinks like, what about my relationship? Like they are my father, they are my respectable. Then Krishna said there are some things we must learn to tolerate. There is a relationship, there is loving connection, which I understand. We must learn to tolerate them. But rest assured, nothing can happen. And then Krishna says, he who thinks can kill is not in knowledge. He who thinks can be killed is not in knowledge also. For the slays, neither slays nor does it slay. Nothing can happen to the soul. So in this way, Krishna establishes the science of the soul.
mm, yeah, thank you, Roji. One thing I would just want to point out then, um, for anybody who's sort of trying to find an excuse maybe to, or maybe, like, if they ask like, well, is that a, can I do anything then? And can I kill people? Or, if that question is posed, um, you know, there's still, there's a very strict and, moral standard in
Mm,
spiritual life.
mm,
And, again, it all comes back to the particular situation that Arjuna is in,
mm,
and what his duty is.
mm,
And, in the next few chapters, especially, we'll talk more about doing one's duty, performing one's duty equipoised.
mm,
And I think that's just important to point out that, it's like, again, it's the reason that Arjuna should be fighting in this battle,
mm,
which we have talked about. But, it's, we're not Arjuna and we're not in his situation. So, um, if the mind is sort of going, hey, do I see an excuse to do something that I want to do? Maybe it's not
mm,
killing somebody, but maybe it's just, something a little bit less severe. Um, there is still that very strong moral standard, and
mm,
really Arjuna has to fight because it is his duty. And so, the things that we have to do, even if they're difficult, if it's what our responsibility is, that's the thing we should do.
mm.
So I just want to say, it's not an excuse to do, like whatever you want, I suppose.
Yes. So good?
Yeah, feel good, Proji? You feel
Yeah.
good?
Yeah. So I think, thank you all the watchers for joining. Uh, we'll see you next week.
See you then.